morning, all of you. Today we are going to start screening of microorganisms. So first of all, we need to know what is screening. Screening is the procedure of isolation, detection, and separation of microorganisms of our interest from a group of population of microorganisms by using selective procedures. So in screening, what we have to do, we have to, from a mixture of microorganisms, we have to select that microorganisms which is useful for our use, that is, which can be used for industrial applications. Those microorganisms will be separated out using the techniques of isolation, detection from the mixture of microorganisms. So actually in the screening, it's a very long process, but we have to do screening for selecting out the microorganism of our interest. So what can be the source of these microorganisms? Microorganism source can be from food, can be from in the environment, where from air, from water, so from soil, because we know that microorganisms, they are omnipresent, they are present everywhere. And there can be, we can isolate microorganisms of use from compost and other sources. Okay, so from these sources, what we have to do, we have to first of all perform the screening. That is, first we have to do the primary screening and then we have to do secondary screening. And the source will be can be from anything. That is, we can isolate microorganisms from food, from environment, and from the compost and other sources. So let's first of all deal with the what important things we need to know while we are going for screening. That is, when we are opting for screening of microorganisms, what should be in our mind to select the basis for the selection of those microorganisms. First of all is the choice of source. That is, from where we are going to isolate the microorganism of our interest. That is, whether from soil, whether from water, whether from air or milk or compost or any food material. So the choice of source is very important. Next is the choice of substrate. That is, all microorganisms, we know they will require the nutrients and growth factors for their growth. So what type of nutrients and growth factors should be given to that very microorganisms, that should be kept in mind before screening the microorganism, because we can't afford that we opt for some substrate which has very high cost, and the production of the thing which the product which is the microorganism is producing is very has very low cost. Okay, so next is the choice of detection. That is, what procedure, what isolation techniques we are going to use to isolate the microorganism of our interest. So what are the different types of screening? Screening can be primary and secondary. For primary screening also we use different types of techniques, like for isolating the organic acid producing microorganisms, we use dyes. For isolating the microorganisms which produce antibiotics, which is a very important metabolite, so we use crowded plate technique. For those microorganisms which can produce extracellular metabolites, we use Auxanotrophic techniques. For any selective compound producing microorganisms like vitamins and amino acids, we need enrichment culture technique. And next is the secondary screening. So actually in primary, the difference between the primary and screening and the secondary screening is that in the primary screening we only perform the process of isolation and detection of microorganisms. That is, from a group of microorganisms we have to select that very microorganisms which will be useful for the purpose which we are going to use for that. That means if I am going to produce cheese, then I have to select that very microorganism which is important in cheese production from a group of microorganisms which is already present in the source. But in primary screening, we don't know what amount of cheese it will be producing, what amount of product, how the product will be obtained. These things we don't opt in primary screening. In secondary screening, actually, what is the amount of the product produced by the microorganism? What after the detection, we have to check that in secondary screening. So primary screening is just the detection technique, and secondary screening is the next step after primary screening to know whether what amount of product and what product actually the desired microorganism is producing. So actually this primary screening deals with the detection and isolation of microorganism of our interest. So here actually from the group of microorganisms, it is detected that which microorganisms are able to produce a given compound, and but it does not give any idea about the yield potential of that very microorganism. That is how much of the compound the microorganism is producing. It separates out the microorganism from group of microorganisms. So we already discussed that these are the techniques used in primary screening, that is clouded plate, indicator dye, enrichment culture, and oxanographic technique, and technique of supplementing volatile and organic substrates. The clouded plate technique already discussed. It is used for the detection of antibiotic producing microorganisms. That is, from soil, if we are going to isolate in microorganism which is able to produce antibiotic, we have to use the clouded plate technique. Then is the indicator dye technique, which is used to isolate those microorganisms which are able to produce the organic dyes. Then is the enrichment culture technique, in which actually which microorganisms which are present in very less number and still they possess some specific nutrient requirement. That's why they are industrially important. So these microorganisms will be selected by the enrichment culture technique. Okay, and next is the oxanographic technique, where some microorganisms, what they do, they produce some extra cellular substances. That is, they have some quality of producing amino acids, vitamins, growth factors, and the other so how we can isolate that? So other microorganisms which require these compounds as growth, we can keep them as test organism, and we can isolate those microorganisms which are able to produce this extracellular substances. And technique of last one is the technique of supplementing volatile organic substances. So here those microorganisms which are able to utilize carbon source from volatile substrates like hydrocarbons, low molecular weight alcohols, or other carbon sources, they can be selected out from the mixture of microorganisms. So these are the 5 techniques used in this primary screening of microorganisms. So after using any of this, we can go for the secondary screening of microorganisms. That is, we can detect what amount of the product the microorganisms is able to produce. Thank you all.